Managing Transitions by William Bridges and Susan Bridges. Making the most of change. Uncover the secrets behind successful life changes. Are you planning to make a major change in your organization? Going through change is tough, there's no doubt about it. When you decide a big shift is necessary to move your team forward, you probably have put in a lot of thought about the practical details. You strategize tools, policies, and role responsibilities that will make up the change. But there's something equally important that people don't always factor in: the human transition that has to take place for new behaviors to stick. Change is a deeply personal journey for every team member. It involves not just altering structures but guiding your team through a psychological shift. In this book summary, we're going to explore why change can be so difficult, and how you can guide your team through a period of adaptation and new beginnings. You'll discover strategies for preparing your team for this transition, handling resistance, and actively involving them in the change process. You'll also learn about navigating the neutral zone, a critical phase of transition, and how to solidify new beginnings, ensuring your team doesn't just adapt but thrives. Ultimately, this guide serves as your map through a change journey that is set for success. Aim for more than just change, aim for real transformation. First key idea: the psychology of change. To create meaningful, lasting change, we need to appreciate that change in the workplace happens on two levels: a situational level and a psychological level. And if we don't address both intentionally, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So, what do we mean by that? Let's say you realize your organization is suffering from its current structure. You put in the time and research and decide to shift from a traditional hierarchy towards a different system of self-managed teams. On paper, it makes perfect sense. But when you start to implement this change, you run into trouble. The thing is that managers often struggle to let go of control. Conversely, team members who rely on leadership direction can start to feel uneasy with the autonomy and struggle to make decisions. After a few months of the new system, you realize that the team structure only really exists on paper, and all the problems you were aiming to fix are as bad as ever. The change itself, moving from a current state into one we envision, is on the situational level. We are moving from situation A to situation B. But the transition between A and B is much more personal. Your team needs to psychologically reorient themselves in order to embrace the change on a psychological level. If we overlook that crucial internal adjustment process, our wonderfully strategized plan can fail, no matter how logical it might be. Preparing your team for transition is as important as planning the change itself. Resistance towards change isn't just a case of people being difficult. It's a natural psychological response towards the unknown, more than being tolerated. Resistance should be expected and planned for. It's your job to guide people through that transition, without framing the change within a transition plan. The ingrained habits and culture will undermine even the best of plans, regardless of whether they benefit everyone. The thing is that people need time to process endings, recalibrate their identities, and try new ways of working. We can't expect an immediate flip of a switch. Instead, we need to map out the psychological change to help your team really transform. Second key idea: preparing for change. Preparing your people for the personal impact of change is just as important as strategizing the practical elements. This is more than just giving them project plans and timelines. It requires getting your team generally ready, willing, and able to cope with the human side of change. Take the clothing company Benetton. They decided to diversify their brand by buying up a range of sporting goods companies, including Rollerblade. The idea was that in addition to the gear itself, Benetton would be able to cross-promote sportswear that they produced. They figured that the acquired companies would be delighted to become part of an internationally successful brand. The problem: they didn't consider how the change would impact the individual people working at the stores they had acquired. Most people who worked for these individual companies were personally involved in a particular sport or activity and had little interest in a more diverse offering. Benetton's efforts to establish a central headquarters in New Jersey didn't go over well with employees of Rollerblade, whose sport was better suited to its original Minneapolis home base. What's more is that they now had to report to former Nordica reps, whose skiing background clashed with the culture of Rollerblade. The result: Benetton went from making $5 million in profit to reporting a loss of $31 million within the year. The lesson here is that before you implement your big new idea, you should start by analyzing exactly how this change will alter attitudes, habits, and ways of working at an individual level. How will roles expand or shift? What new skill sets are needed? Folks who have something of value they perceive they will lose are going to have the hardest adjustment, grieving aspects of the ending. Listen to their concerns seriously and with empathy. Take the time to do your research and talk to people one-on-one. The only way you can manage the transition is if you understand where you're starting from. We also recommend you do some self-reflection. What will this transition require from you as a leader? How can you embody the change you expect from others? How can you involve your team in how this change is done? If you can get your team involved in the planning stages, they will be a lot more personally invested and feel heard. Always keep in mind that managing the human dynamics of change takes dedication, compassion, and understanding. Third key idea: letting go. So, we've covered why transition planning is so important. Now let's talk about the art of getting people to let go. When shifting the status quo, letting go can be the hardest part. It might even evoke a grieving process. This isn't just your staff being difficult or being stubbornly set in their ways. It's a natural step in coming to terms with the end of a comfortable stability. A lot of people will be anxious about their jobs, or mourn the skills they have developed that allow them to thrive in the current way of being. You should have already thought about the people who might stand to lose something of genuine value. Status, close-knit teams, cherished processes. This might be something as obvious as staff cutbacks, but might include less obvious things like lifestyle changes or cultural shifts. One of the reasons rollerblade staff enjoyed working in Minneapolis was because they could take their lunch breaks to skate through the lakeside parks or play roller hockey outside the headquarters buildings. You might see a better path. But these subjective losses can be deeply important. Anticipate some initial overreaction or even denial about having to abandon aspects individual team members found meaningful. Like the turbulent stages of grief, people often cycle between anger, clinging to sentimentality about how things have always been done, or anxiety about the unknown. Have compassion. Transition can feel like losing a piece of personal identity or family. Importantly, frame the rationale for change around resolving a pressing problem, not just seeking improvement. Let people experience the pain points themselves when possible. For instance, if customers are dissatisfied, have team members listen in on calls to build urgency and align around the need for change. Keep two-way dialogue flowing through regular team check-ins as you move forward. Encourage mutual understanding of worries but also hopes. This lets people know that they're being seen and heard. Critical for motivation. And don't just listen. Involve your team in the change conversation. Generate ideas together to make the transition smooth while staying true to the vision. Transitioning takes patience and care, but by equipping people for their losses, you pave the way for them to ultimately redirect their energies into the next exciting chapter ahead. Fourth key idea: the neutral zone. There's an uncomfortable place between where you were and where you want to be. It's that unsettling gap, the one when old structures have been dissolved, but the new ones aren't fully defined yet. This is what's known as the neutral zone. What makes the neutral zone difficult is the uncertainty that people feel about identity, status, and direction. Everyone is holding their breath, wondering if the rocket ship is going to launch. Will the risk be worth it? It's a stressful point in time. But if handled right, it can be a pivotal phase. One huge benefit of this phase is that the fluidity can grant people the freedom to innovate. Encourage people to brainstorm fresh ideas and experiments that align with the vision. This sparks energy and ownership for what's next. As the leader, put temporary systems in place so work carries on while final roles and processes get redesigned. For example, set up cross-functional workflow teams based on skill sets rather than old hierarchies. Critical. Projects can keep developing through collaborative effort. Strengthen intergroup connections as well, the glue that builds resilience amidst ambiguity. Have people identify transition buddies across departments to lend peer support. You can also boost morale with team-building activities. Even simple things like monthly potlucks or trivia can be very effective. Lastly, create a transition monitoring team with representation across levels, tenures, and demographics. Task them with assessing emotional states, gathering input, and addressing concerns. This gives you invaluable data to craft the path forward. The neutral zone is undoubtedly tricky to navigate, But if you foster creativity, connections, and communication here, you're likely to emerge with a team strengthened, realigned, and ready to actively shape what arises next. The seeds planted will determine the fruits of change further down the road. Fifth key idea: making the change. After the creative ferment of the neutral zone, it's time to crystallize the new beginnings taking shape. This is when reinvented purposes, roles, norms, and workflows get defined for the next chapter. Recognize that beginnings prompt the same questions as other transitions. Who am I now? How do I contribute? What rules do I follow? Even when people have shaped the innovations themselves, the unknown still triggers anxiety. Address this directly by ensuring that the 4 Ps are clear across your team: purpose, picture, plan, and part. It's essential that people have a clear purpose in mind, a reason this change had to take place. That's why you need to broadcast a compelling why for the change on a regular basis. Doing so reminds people how the new structures map to strategic goals and better resolve high-priority problems. Paint a vivid picture of the future state, down to how typical workdays may look and feel at an individual level. This grounds the abstract in shared tangible experiences.
To clarify each person's responsibilities and priorities under the new operating model. Everyone should know the part they are going to play, and have support to develop any skills they need to play it. This reduces uncertainty about expectations. With core building blocks framed, reinforce new beginnings through consistency, symbols, and celebration. For example, install visual cues like posters of values associated with the vision. Or develop talking points all leaders use in meetings to drive home key messages. Define some quick collective small wins, perhaps targeting customer pain points, to demonstrate early traction. Momentum builds confidence and belief despite ongoing change. You should also consider a spirited launch celebration where people are honored for the daring ideas or experiments that got you here. Toast the pioneering spirit of transition. After all, marking FRESH starts makes them real. Anchor the next chapter by answering people's desire to know who we are now and what we do. Shape identity and direction, and your team will own it. Sixth key idea: scales of change. As we near the end of our change journey together, let's have a quick discussion about different scales of change within an organization. First, we have organizational development. Organizational development is the everyday improvement of skills and processes that happen in the business-as-usual state. Leadership training programs, ongoing quality enhancement projects, introducing minor changes to tech tools, these advancements optimize work within established systems. Bigger changes come in the form of organizational transitions. This might be large things like introducing an entirely new technology system, scaling up your production, or diversifying your product offerings. They are big but still exist within the current structure of the organization. Every organization reaches a crossroads where external shifts and internal inertia outpace merely tweaking operations. You need periodic renewal to reinvent vision, culture, and systems for a fresh cycle of relevance. This is referred to as organizational renewal, and differs from daily development or situational transition. It's about fundamental transformation. Common catalysts demanding renewal include market saturation, disruptive competitors, cultural fragmentation, and even catastrophe. But the signs can be subtle too, whether creeping complacency, talent flight, or even misalignment between individual and organizational values. Leaders must tune their radar to the host of existential threats lurking beneath surface growth. The renewal journey itself begins with a ruthless assessment of brutal truths, declining metrics, dated practices, and product gaps reflecting changed contexts since the last blueprint. Gathering such evidence is vital to pierce through your sense of denial, yet it also can spark hope for a better future. Renewal should also revisit the foundational purpose of your organization. Why do we exist now? For whom? Does our vision align with emerging realities? Who must we become to own the future? This soul-searching reconnects people to transcendent meaning while making space for the new. Renewal takes our transition management to the next level. More than responding to a specific opportunity or challenge with discrete solutions, deep renewal transforms organizational identity, purpose, and culture, all on a fundamental level. It's about more than effective management and facilitation of psychological transition, but requires you to change at an existential level rather than just make operational adjustments. This means that everything we've covered so far applies, whether it's defining change impacts, honoring endings before defining next chapters, actively shaping identity in the neutral zone, or celebrating new beginnings. Renewal calls leaders to steward this long arc of fundamental corporate rebirth with extraordinary patience, courage, and care for those undertaking this profound personal passage as part of the organizational revival. In summary, effective organizational change is both a situational and psychological journey, requiring careful strategy and deep human understanding. Emphasizing the importance of acknowledging and guiding the human transition, we've explored methods to prepare teams for change, manage resistance, and foster active participation in the transformation process. Strategies like understanding the neutral zone and solidifying new beginnings are vital for not just adapting, but thriving in change. This guide not only offers practical steps for managing change but also highlights the need for empathetic leadership and a comprehensive approach that includes psychological readiness. As we aim for transformation, not just change, we see that success lies in respecting the personal journey of each team member, turning a potentially disruptive process into an opportunity for growth and renewal. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you soon.